Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we dig into some interesting sources and pull out the key ideas for you.
Yep, that's the plan.
And today, well, our mission is kind of sparked by a couple of things. First, there's this new Medium publication launching Geek Stuff podcast. Sounds pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Geek stuff is always good.
Exactly. And it also ties into the ideas in the book AI by Sci-Fi by Jorge Garapires.
Right. AI by sci-fi. Good stuff there.
So our focus today is looking at how science fiction, movies, TV shows, the kind of thing perfect for Geek Stuff podcast can actually be a really surprisingly useful and fun way to get your head around artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. Forget the dry textbooks for a minute. We're actually starting with an article from Geek Stuff podcast itself.
Okay.
It's called Knight Rider and the Car That Thought, Sci-Fi, AI, and the Lost Art of Remakes. And, well, it really gets you thinking about how we've imagined AI in stories and what that says about us.
Okay, Knight Rider, let's jump right in there. I mean, on the surface, yeah, it's total 80s action. Right. Cool dude, talking car, fighting crime.
Pure nostalgia for some of us.
But the article argues, and I think it's right, that underneath there was some pretty deep thinking going on about humans and machines getting along.
And what's wild is thinking about when it was made early 80s. The article points this out. This is before Silicon Valley really exploded. Computers were, well, pretty basic compared to now.
Right. Mainframes and stuff.
Exactly. And then you have this hit show with KITT Night Industries 2000, this car that's genuinely self-aware, super advanced AI. It must have seemed, I don't know, almost magical back then. Truly visionary.
Totally. And KITT wasn't just like a fancy car with gadgets. He was a character.
A proper character.
The article mentions his personality, that dry wit. He was cautious, had this really strong moral code. He refused to kill anyone.
Which is a big deal for an action show hero's sidekick, essentially.
Right. He'd give Michael advice, sometimes nagging him a bit, kind of like his conscience on wheels. It shows that even way back then, writers were, wrestling with the ethics of AI. It kind of reminds me, the creator of Geek Stuff podcast mentioned his professor showing The Matrix in class.
Oh, interesting connection.
Yeah, another sci-fi example where you get that mix of like big scientific ideas and philosophy all rolled into one film.
That's a great point. And the article brings up this really quite poignant moment from the show. Remember when KITT lost his car body?
Oh, yeah. They put his AI core into like a portable TV.
Exactly. And he was genuinely distressed. His whole sense of identity was shaken. And Michael says that line, "You are not the car, you are you."
Powerful.
It really drives home this idea of KITT as sentient, a thinking, feeling being. And it kind of flipped the usual script, didn't it? You had Michael the human, often acting on impulse.
Definitely impulsive.
And KITT, the machine, being the logical, principled one. But KITT had feelings too. It wasn't just cold logic.
So the article suggests this was maybe one of the first glimpses of like ethical AI in pop culture, even before PCs were everywhere.
I think that's a fair reading. I mean, AI research back then was pretty basic, right?
Yeah.
Simple perceptrons, that kind of thing.
Yeah, very rudimentary stuff.
It wasn't until much, much later, multi-layer perceptrons, deep learning, now large language models, that an AI with KITT's level of, reasoning and conversation even started to seem possible.
So KITT wasn't quite AGI, artificial general intelligence, that human-level thinking, but he was hinting at something way beyond simple programming.
He really was. Something capable of collaboration, reasoning, maybe even care. It pushed the boundaries of what AI could be imagined as.
And what about that dynamic? Michael constantly overriding KITT's logic with, "Trust me."
Yeah, that captures something fundamental, doesn't it? That tension between human gut feeling and machine analysis. Who do you trust? When? It's still a relevant question.
Okay, so the article praises the original, but then it shifts gears pretty hard to talk about the 2008 Knight Rider reboot.
Yeah, and let's just say it's not quite as complimentary.
Doesn't sound like it. What went wrong, according to the article?
Well, it argues that the reboot kept all the surface stuff, sleek car, action hero driver, explosions.
The shiny bits.
The shiny bits, exactly. But it completely lost the soul of the original, the ethical debates, the nuances in KITT's personality, that slow build of trust between him and Michael. Mostly...
So just spectacle. The article gives examples, right?
Yeah, it points to the new KITT having this really generic, sterile robot voice, and the new Michael Knight character being kind of bland.
Oh, dear.
It just felt like, style over substance, lots of action, but without that thoughtful core that made the original stick with you.
Why, though? Why lose that depth? Does
Yeah.
the article speculate?
It touches on a few possibilities. Maybe market forces? Studios thinking that pure adrenaline and spectacle are easier sells.
Aiming for the lowest common denominator, maybe?
Perhaps. Or, maybe audience tastes have genuinely shifted. Is there less appetite for that kind of slower, more thoughtful sci-fi on a mainstream level?
That's a bit depressing if true.
The article even draws a parallel to how some feel about modern Star Trek. How the older shows really dug into moral dilemmas and social commentary.
Yeah, the allegories were central.
Whereas some of the newer iterations feel more focused on, like, warp speed plot twists and action sequences. Not always, but sometimes.
So it sounds like the article is saying science fiction used to be this really important playground for big ideas.
Exactly. Back when AI was pure fiction, shows like Knight Rider could really explore things like machine rights, consciousness, ethics, without, bumping up against scary real-world stuff.
It was a safe space for thought experiments.
Precisely. But now AI is becoming real. It's in our phones, our cars, our workplaces. And the article kind of wonders if maybe fiction is getting a bit hesitant now.
Hesitant how? Like, afraid to tackle the big questions?
Maybe. Perhaps the reality is getting a bit too close for comfort. Like, fiction is retreating because the facts are becoming so, confronting.
That's an interesting, if slightly worrying thought.
Although, we should be clear, AI is still very much fiction in key ways. That deep human-machine integration, the superbrain idea mentioned in AI by Sci-Fi, we're not there yet.
Right. We don't have sentient cars driving around.
Not yet. But the article does note how things like large language models are definitely pushing us closer to that boundary, blurring the lines in fascinating ways.
Okay, but it wasn't all bad news for remakes in the article, was it? It mentioned the 2014 RoboCop.
Ah, yes. That's presented as a more, let's say, successful update.
How so?
Well, it didn't just rehash the original. It took the core themes and updated them for now. It really dug into algorithmic governance, surveillance capitalism, very 21st century concerns.
So it shifted the focus.
Right. The big question became less about the man inside the machine and more about who's really in control of the human programming or the code itself.
And the treatment of emotion was different, too, wasn't it?
Massively different and really relevant. In the original, RoboCop regaining his humanity, his emotions, was kind of the point.
Yeah, that was his struggle.
But in the 2014 version, emotion was framed as a problem, a bug almost. It caused hesitation, inefficiency.
Oh, wow.
And the solution they came up with was chillingly plausible, basically running a simulation that gave RoboCop the illusion of choice, while the AI actually made the split-second combat decisions.
Yikes. That feels incredibly relevant to debates we're having right now about AI autonomy and ethics.
Absolutely. It tapped into current anxieties really effectively.
Okay, so let's circle back to the original Knight Rider then. The article's main point seems to be, what? That it was more than just a talking car.
Fundamentally, yes. It argues the show wasn't really about the car's gadgets. It was about trust. Could we, humans, trust the intelligence we create? Especially an intelligence that might be, in some ways, better than us.
Better how?
Well, KITT's real power wasn't the turbo boost or the scanners. It was his ability to think, to reason ethically, and crucially to feel. That's what made him not just a tool, but a partner, a friend, a moral compass for Michael.
And that's the tragedy, the article suggests, of these hollow remakes. They keep the cool car aesthetic.
But they ditch the meaning. They lose that core question about trust and partnership.
So going back to watch the original Knight Rider now, it's not just about 80s nostalgia.
Not according to this article. It's more like a reminder of a time when mainstream pop culture was actually willing to engage with some really hard questions about technology's future.
And willing to imagine machines that could be maybe less flawed than humans, less prone to violence, more principled.
Exactly. Envisioning AI not just as a servant or a threat, but as a potential moral counterpart.
And the unsettling conclusion is, if modern remakes aren't building on that legacy, if they're shying away from those questions.
Well, the article leaves it hanging, but the implication is there. Maybe it says something about us now. Maybe we're less willing as a society to ask those big, uncomfortable questions about the intelligent machines we're building.
That's definitely something to chew on. So for you, our listener, as you maybe check out the new Geek Stuff podcast on Medium or dive into the ideas in AI by Sci-Fi.
Which you can find on Amazon and Google Books, by the way.
Right. Think about this. What other sci-fi movies, shows, books really offers those valuable insights into AI. Beyond Knight Rider, think about the ethics, the philosophy.
Yeah, how do these fictional stories maybe shape how we think about and how we actually build AI in the real world? What lessons are hiding in plain sight in our favorite geek stuff?
It's a fascinating intersection.
It really is. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.